I am Thomas Bowles, Ag Agent in Prince William County, and I am for the soil, for the future, and for the planet.
This is episode number 20 of For the Soil, a conversation. I'm your host, Jeff Ishii. Can you believe it? Episode number 20. I remember when we first started this podcast, it was a collaborative effort. So many people are supporting this podcast, For the Soil, and the Soil Health Coalition. We just want to say, well, it's kind of a milestone for us here on the podcast, and we look forward to doing a whole lot more. One thing I think we could all agree on is we have met some really interesting people over the last 20 episodes of For the Soil. Everything from soil scientists to community activists and gardeners and extension agents, and really a wealth of knowledge from those people about how we can keep our soils and our communities healthy. By the way, if you've missed an episode, you can go back and go to the website forthesoil.org. That's the digit 4, thesoil.org, and you will find an archive of all of our podcasts to date. But thank you so much for your support. And while you're at the site, go ahead and take the pledge to support soil health, whether it be in your own backyard raised bed garden, or maybe on your cotton farm, or however you're involved with the soil. And in some manner, we are all involved with the soil. Thank you so much for taking that pledge at our website, forthesoil.org. Well, without further ado, let's go to the show. Welcome, everyone, to another edition of For the Soil, a conversation. I'm your host, Jeff Ishii, and we have a very special guest on the program today, Mr. Cory Guilliams with the Natural Resources Conservation Service, a branch of the U.S. Department of Agriculture, and Eric Benfelt with Virginia Cooperative Extension, Community Viability. Eric, why don't you go ahead and further introduce our special guest?
Yes, Jeff, and good morning, everyone. And we're pleased to have Cory Guilliams with us. Cory serves as a district conservationist in the Harrisonburg area office of USDA's Natural Resource Conservation Service. And Cory, I think I've worked with you in the Shenandoah Valley area for going on about 14 years, maybe even a little bit longer, but welcome to the show. And if you could tell us a little bit more about yourself and how you actually got interested in natural resource conservation.
Sure. Well, good morning, Jeff, and good morning, Eric. I'm glad to be on your show this morning. As was said, my name is Cory Guilliams, and I'm the district conservationist with NRCS here in Harrisonburg. I've been the district conservationist here for, I guess, going on a little over 14 years now, and I've actually worked here in Harrisonburg for a little over 17 years now, and I've been with the agency coming up on 21 years. So I got interested in natural resources conservation, kind of environmental science and agriculture as a young child. Some of my earliest memories as a child are crawling through rows of beans and potatoes in my grandmother's garden, helping her pick beans and pull weeds. And from a very young age, she told me, we have to take care of the soil in this garden. My grandma had a big garden as a child. It was probably half acre, maybe an acre at the biggest from my memory. But as she got older and food got cheaper in the grocery store, I guess the garden got smaller and smaller. But one thing she instilled in me was the importance of, when we're not producing in the garden, we need to keep something growing there. And so she would always plant a winter cover crop in her garden, usually rye. And then I know that when she decided she wasn't going to plant a certain part of the garden anymore, she would always go to the local Southern States Co-op down in Botetourt County, where I grew up. And she would buy alfalfa and orchard grass, and she would plant that on the garden area that she wasn't going to use. And she told me that would help improve the soil. And then, I remember usually she would leave an area like that in grass for 2, 3, 4 years. And then she would till that up, and she'd always put like potatoes or corn back in that spot. She said that was the soil was recovered there, and I learned what a legume was. She didn't really use the term legume, but she always told me that alfalfa would put nitrogen and other nutrients back in the soil. So and I'm talking at this point, I'm like 8 or 10 years old, and understanding this, and to the point that by the time I was 16, 17 years old, I started putting out my own garden and trying to mimic what I learned from my grandmother. But as I got older, I did not personally grow up on a farm, but had farms all around me. My family had a farm, but they had sold it by the time I was a teenager, and even before then, they were renting it out to some neighboring farmers. But as I got a teenager, I got interested in agriculture because I had my dad had a girlfriend at the time that had horses, and she boarded them at a local farm, and I was there helping out, and just like being there. Maybe the girls had something to do with it on the farm, but I like being around horses. And then I ended up working for that horse farm, and then they moved down the road to a new farm, and completely surrounded by their new horse farm was a large agricultural enterprise, and a beef cattle farm and crop farm. And so I started helping them some on the side. I still actually work for that operation today, John L. Etzler Incorporated. They're down in Botetourt County. They're about an 800 head beef cattle operation. We also cure country hams and make a good bit of hay and stuff there. And I help them as my time allows, at least once or twice a month if I can, if not more, around the holidays and stuff. But where I'm getting at with this is I was all the time outside as a young adult, either working at the horse farm or working on this beef cattle farm. And I just loved the birds and loved being out in the fields, raking hay, mowing hay, tending the crops, harvesting crops. At the same time, helping my grandmother and stuff like that with her garden, and continuing to learn from her and starting a garden some of my own. But where I was living as a young adult on the edge of Roanoke, in kind of southern Botetourt County, Roanoke County, northern Roanoke County on the line, was a fastly growing urban area. And I was watching old apple orchards getting pushed out to into houses. Literally, where I lived at on the edge of the neighborhood, I could see, probably 500-600 acres of land being developed. Not all at one time. They were doing it in stages, but I didn't like that. I'm like, why are we taking our productive agricultural land here and putting it in houses? So all this combined, I'm trying to paint a picture here for you, just got me really interested in protecting the soil and protecting water quality, protecting natural resources. So I ended up going to college at Ferrum College down in Franklin County here in Virginia, and majored in environmental science and minored in agriculture and chemistry. And while I was I believe I was a freshman in college, my freshman and sophomore year, that would have been 1999. There was a pretty bad drought there in Botetourt. I think it was the same here in the northern part of the valley too. And so a lot of our creeks and ponds went dry there at the farm. Well, the Farm Service Agency, they had a program available for farmers to put in wells or develop springs or whatever to get water back to livestock so they could stay in production. And so it's called the Emergency Conservation Program. So the Etzler farm that I was working at, they actually participated in that program. We put in 3 water troughs on the farm and put a pump in the spring to help pump water to the cattle since the creeks and all were dry. And so that was my first experience working with the Natural Resources Conservation Service. And
Cory, it sounds like you've got a wealth of experience, literally a lifetime in agriculture, Virginia agriculture. And I want to ask you about a transition that we've seen in your generation, and you've certainly seen it firsthand. And I'd like for you to talk a little bit about no-till agriculture, disturbing the topsoil the least amount we can. I'd love for you to hear it, to talk about it in consumer terms. Explain to the non-farmer how no-till agriculture can be a benefit for soil health.
Oh, great. So no-till is in simple terms is planting a crop without tilling the soil or turning the soil over. It's basically just cutting a slit into the soil and planting the seed into the soil. Now, generally, this is done with, we have to control the competing vegetation or weeds. And generally, this is done with herbicides to kill those weeds. And, no-till agriculture, no-till farming, crop production revolutionized agriculture. And it started in this part of the world back in the early 60s with various experiments. Some people say the first no-till was in Kentucky. I've heard that the first no-till was here in Augusta County. I've also heard it was in Loudoun County here in Virginia, but this all in the early 60s. And over the decade of the 60s, people kept experimenting with it on farms, and they fine-tuned it to the point to where by the early 70s, it was starting to be more adopted. And basically it is instrumental in helping to reduce erosion and because we're not disturbing that soil and making it loose. And over time, by no-tilling, you are helping to improve the structure of the soil because you're increasing organic matter. You're not going in disturbing the sod, and so you're not disturbing the biological activity of the soil. And so some of the microbes in the soil, they form glues that hold the soil together. And so the longer you go in no-till, the more organic matter generally you will increase in the soil, which makes like a building block, so to speak, like stacking Legos. You just build good firm soil structure, good soil agribility basically. And so I tell people that no-till is probably one of the single most important factors of helping to improve the soil, because I use this expression a lot. Think of a small community of houses, and if a tornado comes through or a hurricane comes through and tears all the houses down, we have to rebuild that. Well, it's the same way in the soil. You have a living ecosystem there with bacteria and fungi and nematodes and things like that, earthworms. And so when you come through with a plow or a disc or a chisel plow or something, you tear all that up. And so those critters in the soil, they have to rebuild that community because they're trying to exist too. And so it's a finely balanced, fragile ecosystem. Now some disturbance in the soil is not a terrible thing, but the more disturbance we do, the more you tear up that biological community, and you lose that structure in the soil. And when you lose that structure, then you start having pollutants. You have erosion, both wind and water erosion. You have nutrients that leak from the system, and things like that.
Cory, to build on that, our colleague Mike Phillips always talks about feeding the below ground livestock.
Yes.
And one of the principles is energizing with diversity. Mm-hmm. And with that, it's the importance of integrating livestock, above ground livestock. So it's the balance of below ground and above ground, and also more interest in carbon and the healthy ecosystem, as you said. If you could speak a little bit more about why we want to integrate livestock above ground.
Sure. So livestock and assisted were great, and the reason why I personally believe that livestock are good in a cropping system if possible is because those livestock consume the carbon material on the surface and help process it through their digestive tracts. And that just helps to speed up the decomposition and the nutrient cycling, if you will. It helps also, I guess, inoculate the soil with a little bit of beneficial bacteria. But you mentioned Mike, and Mike will tell everybody that you got to feed that livestock below the ground in order to feed the livestock above the ground. It's a finely balanced cycle that keeps spinning and spinning. But basically, the hoof action too of the livestock on the soil, that helps a little bit in minor amounts, at appropriate amounts, helps to improve infiltration a little bit, because you're making little pockets for water to sit in and go in. Helps give firm contact for any residue on the surface to help pin it against the ground, so to speak, so the bacteria and fungi in the soil can help to break it down quicker. But yes, having livestock above the surface, in my mind, is a critical thing. And over time, especially since World War II, over the past 80 years, we have moved more and more away from taking fences down around our fields just because they're expensive to maintain. And that's caused us to lose livestock on the landscape. And if you can't get livestock onto a field, I tell people the next best thing is to use manures and or compost, because you have lots of nutrients that are readily available for plants and things like that to utilize in manure and compost.
Cory, just about a minute or so remaining in this episode of For the Soil, a Conversation, and we are talking with Cory Guilliams with the USDA's NRCS. Let me ask you to look into the future. the next 10 to 15 years, do you see any new technology with soil health? Are there any new tools that farmers may use in the future that would improve soil health?
When you say tools, it makes me think of equipment right away. And I see it started in other areas and it's slowly starting to trickle into the Shenandoah Valley here in Virginia. But I see rolling down of cover crops. We've been doing that here, working with farmers since about 2006, 2005, when I first started working in this part of the world. I see more and more technologies improving there to where we can roll down high biomass cover crops to plant no-till in, as we were talking about earlier. That high biomass will keep the ground covered and help to prevent erosion, help to keep the soil cooler so that the biological activity in the soil can function at optimum levels. And I see helping for nutrient and water retention as well. So I'll see people modifying planters to include rollers on planters so you can do it all in one pass. I think that will hopefully increase. It's already taken off very much in southern Pennsylvania, in the Lancaster County area and west. I also see maybe interseeding of cover crops into standing crops becoming a more popular technology in the area as time goes. That's where we're either broadcasting or directly planting cover crops into standing growing crops just so we can get them in a timely fashion. That's a problem now in the area. Sometimes we don't get our grain crops off until later in October, early November, and sometimes that's a little bit late for a good cover crop. So if we can plant that potentially in July or August into a crop, I think that would be beneficial.
Well, Cory, on behalf of all of our listeners, thank you for everything you do for our agricultural community. If anyone should have questions about soil health, I'm sure you would encourage them to contact their local office of the NRCS or their local extension office. There's a lot of resources out there, and those resources are available also at our website, forthesoil.org. That is the digit 4, thesoil.org. Eric and Cory, thank you both for joining us.
Thank you, Jeff.
Thank you, Jeff.
Time now for a soil health tip from Dr. Rory McGuire at Virginia Tech.
Keeping the soil covered is very important in terms of preventing soil erosion. Soil erosion is one of the biggest ways to decrease soil quality. If you lose the soil, you're losing the valuable part of your land. So keeping the soil covered prevents soil erosion. And when raindrops directly impact the soil, they can form a crust on the soil surface. They actually break the soil structure right at the soil surface. And once the soil structure is broken at the surface, you don't get any infiltration of water anymore. And of course, if water doesn't infiltrate, it runs off. And when it runs off, it takes the soil with it. So keeping the soil covered is extremely important in terms of preventing surface crust formation and soil erosion.
Thank you, Dr. Rory McGuire at Virginia Tech. For the Soil, a conversation is made possible with funding support from the National Fish and Wildlife Foundation and the Agua Fund. Other partners include the USDA's Natural Resources Conservation Service, Virginia Cooperative Extension, Virginia State University, Virginia Department of Conservation and Recreation, and partners of the Virginia Soil Health Coalition. Views expressed on this podcast are those of each individual guest. To download a copy of this or any other episode, visit the website forthesoil.org. And if you have a specific question about soil health, contact your local extension office, your local USDA service center, or a soil and water conservation district office. Music used during today's program was provided courtesy of Jackson F. Smith. All rights reserved. For the Soil, a conversation is produced by On the Farm Radio in collaboration with Virginia Tech. I'm your host, Jeff Ishii.